Well, 2012 is going to be an exciting year. The madness surrounding the presidential election has already started. But it looks like come November, President Obama is going to have a lot to deal with. He won't just be facing off with whomever the Republican nominee is. He will most likely be getting a whole lot of questions about his role in the U.S. relationship with Israel. Has he been strong enough? Was he right to support elections in Egypt that have resulted in the Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafis being voted into power? These are Islamists that the people of Egypt have chosen to lead, and quite a few people, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, are extremely unhappy about. So, what should the role of the U.S. be concerning Israel? This is a subject Max Blumenthal, writing fellow for the Nation Institute, has written quite a bit about. Now, I spoke to him just a little earlier from our New York studios and asked him about the role of the super PAC. It is alive and well this year, as we already know. I asked him if he thought this would be one of the loudest voices against President Obama coming up this year. Take a listen.
Well, what I wrote about in Al Akhbar English is the degree to which Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is completely immersed in the American presidential campaign and the culture wars of the United States. He's the first Israeli Prime Minister who's aligned himself completely with one political party, the Republican Party, in a campaign to unseat President Barack Obama. And some of his cutouts, his neoconservative allies in Washington, have started this super PAC, the Emergency Committee for Israel. And right now, the only guy they're going after is Ron Paul, because he's a Republican candidate calling for an end to the U.S.-Israel special relationship. But ultimately, this will turn on President Obama once the Republican campaign is resolved. And it will turn on the issue of Iran.
I think this is really interesting, and I know you also wrote about that connection between Bibi Netanyahu and the Republican Party and the money aspect of this. And all you have to do is follow the money. You take someone like casino mogul Sheldon Adelson. We know that name here because of that $5 million check he just wrote to GOP candidate Newt Gingrich. Turns out, as you write about, he's also a major contributor to Netanyahu. What do you think we should take from this money aspect of this?
It's kind of remarkable because there's a discussion in the U.S. media about Adelson's role in the presidential campaign and no mention of Israel. They refuse to say the Israel word. And Adelson's game is he's a union buster in Las Vegas who became friends with Newt Gingrich. He's funding Gingrich's campaign. He gave Gingrich $5 million to a Gingrich-aligned super PAC right after Newt Gingrich called the Palestinians an invented people. At the same time, Adelson owns a newspaper in Israel called Israel Hayom, which is considered Netanyahu's house organ, his propaganda sheet. And he's financed pro-Netanyahu think tanks. So there's a clear, so Adelson is the link between Netanyahu and the U.S. presidential campaign. What I'm unable to completely figure out, and what I think a lot of people in the U.S. are wondering, is why is Adelson funding Gingrich's campaign, which is so anti-Romney? Gingrich has dedicated his campaign to destroying the Republican frontrunner Mitt Romney, while Romney has surrounded himself with neoconservatives who are very close to Netanyahu's agenda. So it's hard to understand what's going on there.
Are you suggesting there might be something that hasn't come out yet that might come out in the near future, or you're just thoroughly confused, as many of us are?
I mean, Adelson's gift to Gingrich could have just been just that, a gift to a friend. But I'm sure that Sheldon Adelson and Benjamin Netanyahu would be just as happy with a Mitt Romney presidency as they would with the Newt Gingrich presidency. Both are going to be supportive of the Greater Israel Project, of settlements in the West Bank, and they seem at least mildly supportive of a military strike on Iran. And that's Netanyahu's game.
I want to go to something you said just a few minutes ago. You said a lot of the media covering this, covering that donation by Adelson, they refuse to say the Israel word. Why is it that the media is not talking about this whole aspect? As I'm sure we will be in the months ahead, but it's also an important aspect now.
Well, Adelson's a funder of the Israel lobby in the United States. So is Mel Sembler, who's a major funder of Romney's campaign, key donor to a Romney-aligned super PAC. And the media in the United States is terrified of the Israel lobby and the power it has to suppress this discussion. I mean, I know producers in the mainstream media in the U.S., and they say, yeah, we're never going to discuss this issue of the U.S. relationship with Israel in a frank way. And this is just one more example. Rachel Maddow had a segment on Adelson's relationship with Gingrich, and she just made a reference to Sheldon Adelson's dark money. No reference to the fact that he is funding Netanyahu and is incredibly interested in seeing the settlement project in the West Bank continue.
You talk about this powerful relationship. Certainly, we've done countless stories here at RT of candidates from both sides of the aisle visiting Israel, making that sort of pilgrimage as a necessary stop on their own campaign trail, going to Israel. It's very interesting. Obviously, Israel has a lot of power. The relationship between the U.S. and Israel has a lot of power. But do you think there's enough power and money there to take down the Obama campaign, despite whatever candidate, however weak the Republican candidate is?
I say pretty clearly in my piece in Al Akhbar English that I don't think that Netanyahu and the combined power of the Israel lobby can decide a presidential election, but what they can do is color the American political landscape. And what's happening with Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, at the head of an extremely right-wing coalition in Israel, aligning himself completely with the Republican Party, is that Israel has become a wedge issue in the campaign, whereas before it was there was a bipartisan consensus around it. And this is worrying the Jewish establishment in the United States, which counts on bipartisan support for Israel. The Center for Security and International Studies, a centrist think tank in Washington, has said that the partisan wedge around Israel is likely to deepen in the future because partly Netanyahu's involvement and the involvement of the neocons. And what this means is that the Democratic base is likely to turn increasingly more critical of Israel, even if Democratic politicians vote with the Israel lobby. And this is of great concern, as I said, to the Jewish establishment and the mainstream pro-Israel establishment in the United States, that Israel could be another wedge issue like abortion and gay marriage in a political campaign.
It certainly often seems that they're trying to do that. We should mention one of the major groups in favor of Israel that wants to work with Israel, work with Netanyahu, is sort of the evangelists, the right-wing Christians in this country seem to have a very special partnership with them. Just real quick, Max, if it becomes clear in the polls as we get closer to November that President Obama is likely to win a second term, what does Israel do?
Well, Netanyahu signaled his intention to call early elections because he's so worried about a second Obama term, partly because he's being attacked by the opposition leader in Israel, Tzipi Livni, for damaging the U.S.-Israel special relationship. And that could affect him in the polls because the special relationship is critical to Israel's entire policy. And so if Netanyahu is seen as damaging his relationship with Obama, if Obama dares to ever criticize Netanyahu in public, it could damage him very deeply. So I think what we're going to see if Obama's clearly going to have a second term is an early election in Israel, and Netanyahu probably triumphing.
All right.
And then a very rancorous second term for Obama with Netanyahu.
Certainly an important discussion to be having now, we think, in January, as opposed to waiting until, August or September when we start to see these strange ads from a strange super PAC and wonder why they're coming out. Max Blumenthal, writing fellow for the Nation Institute. Thanks so much.
Thanks.